Hey everyone, just back another IG live. So yeah, it's 5 o'clock. The word of the week is it's different and but the same for all of our previous words, and so um, let's see. I'll let people like join in. Nice to see you. But yeah, so the word of the week, and pardon me if I mess up the pronunciation because I may do that, but it's Bayanihan or Bayanihan. Like I feel really awkward trying to I just know I'm gonna mess it up. But pardon me. But the key thing is not necessarily how well you pronounce a word, but it's your if you understand the spirit of the word. And so this word is a Bayanihan, and it's from the Philippines, and it's just a really important word, I think, for the time. So I'll give a little bit of a backstory on this word, but my friend Les told me about it. Like I don't know, not that long ago. Maybe just like a couple weeks. Les and I were working on a project, and the project's called Sama Sama. And thought like, oh, I initially asked her what Sama Sama means, and she told me that it means all together. And I was like, that's just a great word. Like more people should like know this word. The art project that we're working on together is called Sama Sama. And so I originally had the idea of using Sama Sama as one of our words for the week. Um, but then I just started talking to Les even more, and she just started talking and saying more Tagalog words. And one of them that she mentioned was Bayanihan, and it just really resonated with me, and it speaks to a lot of what SEL cares about. And so the word technically it means like being being part of a community, being part of a bayan is how they say. And I just think one of the big things for the US, and this goes to like the newsletter we had last week, is a lot of our perceptions of people and place, our relationship with everything, is really essence based. It's based on like the thoughts that people have, but not necessarily being and the actions that you have as you be in the world or be with people or be with, just exist. And so I apply like a very existentialist approach to a lot of the work of SEL and how we see things. And I think a lot of what's happening in the U.S. is us trying to free ourselves from like this essence oriented way of life to focus more on existence a bit more. And so one of my key interests is when I talk to other people about their cultures and their language, like what are these like unique words that are pretty common in their language that speak to like existing in their culture. Like these are words that you just kind of like instinctively know if you exist in that place, because these words help like guide you about how to exist in these particular environments. And so when Les said this word, it that's what resonated with me. I could see that this was a word that was used to articulate a way of existing in the Philippines, and that even if you aren't there, you still have that word in your mind, and it can guide your interactions with other people. You'll know that they won't have the word, so clearly it won't. The capacity to reciprocate will be diminished, but the spirit of the word exists. And I just don't think the US has nearly enough words that speak to existing in your community, existing in your town. And I just thought it was really, really important. And so that's the word. And if anybody has any questions, I can chat. I always enjoy answering questions, any thoughts have, but I can also just keep on talking about the significance of the word and like this context and the previous context. And so I guess one thing that I found really interesting as I did more research and thought about the word even more is that, like, right now in the Philippines, they're using this word to describe the legislation that they're passing to combat COVID. And that was really significant because in the US today, hey Cassandra, in the US today, we are not dealing with COVID well at all. And you can see that one of the key reasons why is that there's not a sense of community. There's not like a language for being in a community or being in a town or your nation. It's all people having these very individualistic ideas about how they want to live as individuals in a space and how other people are obligated to accommodate their selfish sentiments. And like as states like Texas and California and Florida are having to like mandate that people wear masks to stop spreading like a deadly disease. We're seeing all of these people just freaking out, and and you can see it all over the internet because they have to wear a mask. They feel like doing any sort of selfless act, any sort of sacrifice that would be beneficial to the community is as like an infringement on their rights. And it's just such a crazy idea, but like that idea is so prevalent in the US. And so when you see how other societies are coping with the same deadly disease and they're able to project the narrative of what they want to do to combat it by using a communal word, that's really significant. And it shows how really simple words that you use every day, not words that are like, in academia or fancy per se, actually have like really strong philosophical, existential foundations that can also manifest into the legislation and the spirit of the legislation and the spirit. It reverberates throughout an entire culture where people at an individual level are willing to help out their neighbor, and then at the same time people passing legislation are interested in invoking that same spirit to combat something that's impacting an entire country. And so like I thought about that quite a bit as the US still struggles with corona, and I think a lot of people are even contemplating like how many more months, like will this be the norm for like through the election, which isn't a far-fetched idea. And we have that fear because we don't have a discourse of people really trying to understand how to function within a community and the selfless acts you need to do to be successful at sustaining a community. And I think that's really, really, I just think that's really important. And so yeah. So hey Matt, hey Cassandra, hey Jackie, thanks for coming. If you guys have any particular questions about this word of the week, please let me know. And also like this word is it's significant because this is the first word we've used. That's not like European origin word. It's not like Greek or Latin or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm really excited about that. At the same time, it makes me like have anxiety because I'm confident that I'm gonna mispronounce it because I'm not really that good at see, exactly, Cassandra. I'm trying to avoid it sometimes. So like, it's how I would read it would be Bayanihan, but it's like that, but it isn't. And so, but Bayanihan I think is close enough, but I don't know. Anyways, I have anxiety about making sure I pronounce it right. And so, no, you didn't put me on the spot. Like it's something I have to keep on practicing because that's just a key component of all of it is making sure that you like enunciate and articulate everything properly. And as you learn languages and learn words, this is something we all are going to encounter. But like I guess one of the key things with these words that I try to put into the space is like some of them, they're words that you probably can just like use and add to your dialogue that you could just say all the time. Like I've already had people say that like, hey, yeah, I use Geist. I say Geist. Like that's pretty easy. Of a lot of words, you won't necessarily say them all the time, but you'll have them in your head and you'll think about them and they'll influence and you and they might make remind you of other words that you don't use as much. And it's like, maybe this is the English equivalent of this because another key thing about language is it's like regionally specific. So like, like one key thing of Bayanihan is is that the act of moving is a big part of it. And so for some reason in the Philippines, clearly due to like the environment, like the tropical environment, there's like a lot of indigenous houses would be made of like bamboo and leaves and stuff that's like not too heavy. And so if someone needed to move to another part of the village, they could put those on bamboo sticks and just literally carry them to the other side of the village. And that's like a big kind of like, it's like a figurative, it's a literal like putting someone's house on your back and carrying your neighbor's belongings without expecting anything in return, which is, that's just really significant. That's profound. That's the act of this. And other places where like the houses are heavier, they need to be thicker because it's colder. This would not, it would be impossible to engage in that action. And so like the equivalent in another place might have nothing to do with moving a house. It might have something to do with, I don't know, stopping flooding or protecting it from rain or something like that, or from the cold. And so this word, if you can't pronounce it, if you're not confident in your capacity to pronounce it like clearly all the time, the spirit of the word's quite significant. And there's going to be American or other European words that people might feel more comfortable or confident in saying. But I don't know. I think I'm talking a little bit of my anxieties to a certain extent, which I didn't anticipate today, because it's like I hear the word, I see the word, I read it, I'm like I get it, and it's like, oh man, I haven't spent like months and months and months saying this word out loud, and I was like, and these other words, I actually did. That's wild. Didn't see that coming, but I understand it and I have it like all in my head, and so. That wasn't this is an interesting development this week. But anyways, if anybody has any questions about the word, please let me know, and I can keep on talking about it. But I guess the key thing of just to grasp about it is like it's very existentialist, and as we are confronting like America's ethnocidal. And so what we have is a society that's based on dividing people. And I think right now we're seeing how those divisions are catastrophic. I think a lot of people have seen the problems with these divisions for a long time. But if you look at COVID and how it's disproportionately harming communities of color for various reasons, but these divisions are from ethnocide, you go, like the core of like how our cities are structured, how our funds are allocated, the jobs people have, it's all based on this type of division. At the same time, if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's happening following George Floyd, you're seeing how this division in the U.S. is just so profound that a lot of people are waking up to it now, even though it's been there forever. And like this is all ethnocide. And so if we have this division in our society, what you end up realizing is we don't cultivate the language for collectively helping people out. That's just not a thing that happens, because that's just not how our society is built to function. And so what this type of word, this word Bayanihan, it really helps you think about how simple and easy it can be to have a word that's so normal, so part of your everyday life, that everyone says that if you go to the Philippines, people will say they're so warm and they're so giving and they'll help you out, and they just seem happy. They'll it's because there's a spirit, and this word is kind of, I can't say, it's hard to say, so it's almost like a chicken before the egg kind of thing, but it's like, what came first, like the people acting this way or the word? Either way, you have to have both of them. And in the US, we just don't really have either. We have people that want to, but we don't have the structure or the language to really do it. And so I think that's kind of why Bayanihan like really resonated with me this week, and why I wanted it to be the word of the week. And it also kind of goes to the importance of making sure that you kind of make that extra leap to get familiar with different languages and different cultures and different words, and use them to empower yourself and enlighten and influence how you go about your day. Because there's always going to be, wherever you go, a word in like a different culture that you're going to struggle to translate because it's regionally specific. You'll have a similar word but not the exact same word. Oh, yeah, Matt, I'll explain the word again. Yeah, of course. So the word, it means being in a community, and it's a Tagalog word from the Philippines, and it also means the act of helping and sustaining your community. And so, at a like day to day level, it can be giving your neighbor or someone in your community something that they need, just like real casual stuff, like being neighborly, you could say is close to what that is, but it's bigger than just being neighborly. And so one big example in the Philippines, is when people move. They will, due to the houses being made of like bamboo and leaves and like stuff from nature, they're not heavy. It's not like bricks in many of these like rural communities. And so people will literally put bamboo sticks under the house, and like 15 to 20 people will then lift up a house and carry it to the other side of town. And so this is like a sacrificial, beneficial act for a community where people aren't expecting anything in return. At the end of the exchange, it's not even exchange. At the end of the act, they'll be gifted with like a meal, but not like a monetary thing. Everyone knows it's part of like, this is what you do as a member of a community. And so this word in many ways, like you could say it's like a part of the spirit of like the Philippines. And when I was researching it this week, I saw that some of the legislation that the government of the Philippines was passing to combat COVID. And I can't, I can't say how effective it's been. Like I don't know that, but the language they used, was Bayanihan. They used this word to describe the legislation, the spirit of what they wanted to do to combat COVID, which is we are being in a community together. And so these are the policies that we are creating to collectively deal with this deadly contagion, and that this is influencing resources and funds to help people survive. And so I just thought it was a very yeah. So yeah, it is like, it is a noun and it's an act, which is, yeah, it makes it hard to translate, because it is like, it's like the act of it, but it's also just like it itself. Um, and so it's even in English, sometimes I think about when you have these conversations, and like existential philosophers will have this about like being, just like the verb to be. You can be without actually like doing action. And so it's still a verb, but it's also like something that doesn't require action at all. And it can be like a person or a place or a thing. And so it's like a both. And so like, yeah, like Cassandra, you are correct. It does seem like I'm using it as a verb, and it's listed as a noun, but it's from like how I've heard it and how I've read it. It's like kind of ambiguous. It can be a both, and so yeah. Um, but yeah, so that's it's a good question. It's a good point. It's it's complicated, um, because yeah. I know, Matt. I know it's a both, and like it. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like this is a funny one because I'm in some ways learning a bit. Like the whole process, it's always learning, and so I'm learning more and more about other cultures as I constantly explore and get new words. And so, but yeah, it's like a both. But good question. I really appreciate that. Um, but yeah, Jackie, Luna, do you guys have any questions? Any thoughts as I work through our latest word of the week? Um, I guess another thing I liked about the word is a lot of my work in focuses on like existentialism. Um, yeah, see, it's part of the charm. And so about existentialism, and this word's all about existing. And so like existing is a both. You know, it is an action, and it is like a thing, and it is a person, and it's like a place, and it's all of the stuff. And even like in European like dense philosophical stuff, like the philosophers will come up with like different ways for like articulating being, which is like, like the act of being, and then just being itself. And in other languages sometimes they don't make that distinction, you know. It's just kind of like this, it just like it just is. And it's you do that in both ways, and it's not necessarily like an action. And like, I guess a good example, sometimes when I write, people will say that I use passive voice too much, and that I need to like use active voice like all the time. And active voice, I get it, but like I think we overly use active voice. Where like, if you're not articulating how you're doing something with it being action, 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 people are implying that there's some sort of passivity to it. When like maybe like, like meditation or sitting still isn't necessarily like an action. Thinking all day and just kind of like going with the flow, like that could best be articulated with like a passive voice, while that's not being passive. And linguistically, like that's something that I struggle with conveying, because there's not a passivity to determining that you're not going to um, uh, do like a stereotypical action. And I think in other languages that's they don't make those hard distinctions. Okay, here we go. Because then we can stop thinking about these actions as something extraordinary and something that's just a part of our everyday behaviors in life. Yes, exactly. It's just it yeah, it's just part of your everyday life. It's something like, another thing that's really cool about this word is when I was talking to Les, you could see, and when I was reading about it, you could see that like people don't it'd be hard to describe how they go about living without the word. Like it's a subtle word, yet like an all-encompassing word. And I just don't know how many similar types of words we have like that. And I think it's important to think about how profound that can be, where it's something that's philosophical, at least we would say it's philosophical, while also just casual. And there's a lot of depth to it, and there's a lot of ways that you can articulate how it manifests itself in people's day-to-day lives, whether that's an active or passive manifestation, whether that's a manifestation that someone's doing something, or it's just like a manifestation where like that's how you would identify what that is over there, you know? Um, and so, yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, Luna. I also feel like so much of community in the Philippines is shaped by U.S. imperialism and bureaucratic governing that's influenced by capitalism. Yeah, yeah. It's so like another thing that's really key is a lot of it's really so much of the world is shaped by like westernized perceptions of these environments, and those perceptions are very essence based and money driven. And so if you look especially like Southeast Asia, you just look at just Southeast Asia in particular, but like a lot of Western imperialistic bureaucratic ideas have shaped the region quite profoundly, and I think it makes sense for us, especially in the U.S., where we have such diversity and so many populations of people from all across the world, that we allow some of the concepts and languages and philosophies of these places to help shape how we try to become a better place. Because I think it's becoming pretty obvious that capitalism and colonization and so many of the things that America has been trying to tell the world and itself are really good things are becoming very, very clear to a lot of Americans that they aren't that good, and clear to the rest of the world that they aren't that good. And I think COVID and the protests following George Floyd are really making a lot of people wake up. And so, would I consider Bayanihan to be a passive or active word, or does it depend on the context in which it is used? I guess it depends on the context. It's so like it's definitely like an act that you do, but I would also say that there's like the spirit of the word that precedes the action. So like people can profess that they are part of a community, um, and maybe you could say that like articulating that you're part of a community is an action, um, but it's kind of like in a real simple way you could look at your family, like you are part of a family, kind of regardless of whether you do or don't do an action. But like if you are part of a family, then you're gonna then do actions to help and sustain it, because that's what comes with it. But you are also that even when you're not doing the actions. It's like if you have a if you have a sibling, it's like, so like if you have a sibling or a family member that you don't get along with, like you're still part of that community, that family, even when you aren't necessarily acting as if you are. But if there's already a language and a spirit to help guide you in your actions, to help and sustain it, it makes it more likely that the actions that you will do will be beneficial ones. Like that's the thinking, that's the thought, because it's stuff that you would do to sustain. And if more and more people have this idea, have this philosophy, have this language, then it will be easier for you to do something without expecting something in return, because you know that at some point somebody will help you in that same spirit. Like like the U.S. will have cheesy stuff like pay it forward. We even use monetary language for that. But like if you kind of view yourself in like this ecosystem that just exists and is being, it is there whether you or it are being passive or active. So I guess it depends on the context. But from what I've heard, it's just it's kind of all encompassing. Like I kind of said earlier, maybe it's a both. Uh, but I feel like since the people who don't want to wear masks aren't the type of people who watch these kinds of videos, it would be really hard to get this word to those who need to hear it the most. Um, yeah, but like it's also, let's see. I think the U.S. What's a good way to say this? Like you don't need to win over the people who don't have a desire to learn any of the stuff. But what you do need to do is is empower the people who do want to learn. Let's say we're like a classroom, and like 20% of the classroom gets it, and 60%, we'll say 50%, possibly could, and then there's 40% who don't have any desire. The goal is to get those 50% who possibly could and see what could happen. The other people, if the focus is on like getting all of them to get it, then there's going to be a problem. I think the big issue with the US is that there's so many, maybe there aren't as many as we think, but there seems to be quite a large amount of people who don't really want to learn anything except the belief that if they have an idea, then that idea is correct and they should just be able to do it forever and nothing else matters. Like we have too many of those types of people. But there's plenty of people, and you can see it right now, who are actively trying to do good work. And I think we are linguistically like recognizing that we're lacking language to empower people to do the good things that they want. There's the feeling, there's the desire, but there's not like the philosophy or the language to support it to the degree that we would like. And so this type of word is more for that audience. You know, like I'm sure all of us have friends who know the science, know COVID, and the goal is to make sure that you make it your lifestyle right now to help everyone stay safe, and you're not cutting corners, you're not being casual, and as you do it, and you aren't cutting corners and being like unnecessarily casual, you don't feel like it's a punishment. You feel like you're doing, you need to find a way to make so that you feel like you're doing something good. And this is words like this, language like this helps that happen, so that the people that want to do good things can be better at doing those types of things. And so, like, let's see. So like I'll say a good example. Like I've mentioned to probably most people that have gone to the IG lives, but there's like an 11-year-old kid in my house, and this kid the other day, he wanted, I don't know what happened, but he read some article about being heart healthy. We don't know where this article came from. I don't know what happened. But he read this article and he's like, I want to make sure my heart is healthy. And so he doesn't want to eat a bunch of red meat anymore. He wants to be mostly vegetarian. And we're like, wow, vegetarian? No fish? He's like, I got to eat fish. It's like, all right, so pescatarian it is. And then he decided to like start working out, but like he didn't know how to work out. We have like weights in the house, he'd do it, and next thing you know, he'd like get little muscular stuff here or there. And so now I work out a little bit more. And I show the kid how to do stuff. Like I played sports. I know how to like go and get muscles and things. And so like I'm working out now and helping this kid, and I'm being like maybe even a little more disciplined than I usually am about exercising, because like it'll help the kid. And that's something that I'm doing without a word to support it. It's just more like a feeling. But like if I grew up in a place that had a word for like being in a community, and view this kid as my community, then I would say, yeah, I'm doing this. This is part of Bayanihan, and I would just be doing that, and that's what I would be saying, and that's how I would be doing it, and make it easier for me to be better at that action than I currently am, because now it's just like a feeling. It's like I just feel like it's the right thing, and I due to having numerous words of the weeks, I have language that I can anchor myself to make myself more confident that like I'm not crazy and that this makes sense and blah blah blah. But if you don't have it, it's harder to be as consistent. And so no, the point isn't necessarily to win over all the crazy people, but there probably are like a chance that like some of these crazy people with a nudge here or there might just be like crazy adjacent and not not start screaming at people and stuff. And there's also plenty of people who are well aware of the COVID stuff, and they're like, I can just take a weekend off or this, that, the other. And it's like, can you? Can you really? I don't know. I'm not sure. And why does it have to seem like a punishment and not just like you doing what you need to do to like help your community to survive? And so that was kind of a long answer, but I hope that answered your question, Jackie. Um, and so yeah, don't get fixated on the people who don't have any desire to learn, because there's plenty of people that want to learn, and just like tweaks here or there can help them get all better at stuff. And like, for example, so here's a cool story about this kid. I bought these jump ropes. I really recommend them. They're called cross ropes. They do not pay me to talk about these things, but they're weighted jump ropes, and they're great. You can get like a good exercise in like 10 minutes. And so I got like an extra pair for the kid to do the jump ropes too. And he proceeded to injure his back because and I was like, how did he hurt himself? It's just jump ropes. Like, what's going on here? And so I was like, I'd watch him jump rope. I was like, this kid doesn't land on his toes. Like, he lands all flat-footed. Whew. That's not, now like all the reverberation of the jumping is like going like up all through his back. Like, his back hurts from jumping because he's just landing all flat-footed, not on his toes. And so now I started watching the kid. I was like, man, when he runs, he's running flat-footed. He's walking a bit too flat-footed. My friend and I went to go kick the soccer ball around, and I was like, I'm bringing the kid along. And so the kid came along. It's like, man, all flat-footed. All right. So now we're just doing stuff to get him on his toes, get the muscles so that he like doesn't injure himself. But like, that's something that you do. Like, I think in America, I would probably say that's just like me being nice. I think that's just like a nice thing to do. But like, that word doesn't really have the oomph of what like really is what's happening. It's like, there's a kid. I think I have some information to make him like not hurt himself as he's trying to work out, as he's trying to like get better at stuff. So as like my obligation in the community, let me help him. I'm not expecting him to give me something. I'm not expecting like a freaking card for him to be like, thanks Barrett, or any of that kind of stuff. Like, I don't really care. It's just like, it'd just be absurd to not do it. But like, my brain only with my American English thinks about like how it would be absurd to not do it, opposed to knowing what's the smart thing to do. And I think that's like a big difference. And I think like this word like Bayanihan speaks to that, where it's like, instead of thinking of this, it makes it easier to think of the right thing to do and not question the legitimacy of doing the right thing, because there's already like a language and a philosophy for it. And so that's why I liked it. And I also liked that it kind of took me a bit out of my comfort zone, because there's so many different languages in Asia, and they make so many different sounds that I'm just not accustomed to making. But like, that's part of the fun. How would you encourage Bayanihan in the U.S. because Western societies are individualistic? So like, yeah, Western societies are super individualistic, um, but I think they've over time, once they nearly like wipe themselves out, find out that like it's not that beneficial to be that individualistic. I think like existentialism and really started coming up like I actually probably the best example would be like Marxism and communism. Like once industrialization was like dividing up families and taking like back in the day like people in Germany or wherever their last name would be shoemaker because like the guy made shoes and like he would make them like in his little area and his kid would be an apprentice and like the whole family unit was a one, and their name was defined by their craft. But then industrialization happened, and now like nobody was defined by their craft anymore. You were just like a cog in like a machine producing stuff that you didn't care, and you weren't hanging out with your family anymore. Your family was probably in the factory, and you weren't even talking to them throughout the day, and so everyone got like really individualized and alienated, and this alienation was quite problematic. And now the idea of communism like came into being, and they had to create a language to articulate the benefit of like being together and not being like individual cogs. And so I think the US is kind of engaging in a similar process now, um, of recognizing the downsides of our individualistic, you know, philosophy, where like this individualism that we profess like only was able to work via like systemic oppression. Like white people could care about being individuals because they because black people were oppressed forever. Like if it's kind of guaranteed you're not going to get a horrible job because all the bad jobs are reserved for black people and other people of color, you can think of yourself as an individual, but like you're still white. And so like even in this American idea of individualism, it's still preceded by like a collective identity idea of whiteness. And so it's a big facade. And so now as America's more diverse and we can see how this individualistic idea just preys upon like non-white people and actually disconnects white people from white people too. I think we're more apt and open for collective language than we may have been even 10 years ago. I think the Affordable Care Act is a pretty good example where we now talk about universal health care, and that was just not a thing America had ever thought made any sense before. And so I think words like Bayanihan are possible, but they're also like regional specific. So like it's more like the idea of like that community and creating stuff that forges a community. Like to be in a community, you have to also have to make a community, and America's not really good at making communities either. And so it's kind of like a couple steps. You have to articulate the benefit of a community, and then you have to then be able to articulate the acts that you do to sustain it without exploiting other people. And yeah, it makes me think of like another word, which I don't want to just drop that word on this one because I was planning on using it for another newsletter, but it's a Dutch word that's pretty good, that speaks to this. So, anyways, I think right now the U.S. is more open to these types of collective words, but yeah, it's a obstacle. There's an impediment because the U.S. is very individualistic. And that's just how it is. I will say, like the African American community, uh, we aren't that individualistic because like we had to form a community to protect ourselves from white people. So there's definitely division. Don't get me wrong, but like a lot of that division is based on like if you get access to like the success, the opportunity that whiteness can provide you. So like if like a lot of times we talk about colorism and stuff like that, like that division happens because like lighter skinned brown people, black people, would get opportunities that whiteness would have. So like our cultural divisions in many ways derive from like a proximity to whiteness, but like the community that we try to forge is quite it's pretty equitable is the idea. And so, but if you don't have the language to articulate why that's better than being an individual, then you have a problem. Also, here's another thing. I was talking to somebody maybe late last year, and they told me there's this thing called the tragedy of the commons. And I just thought, I was like, what is this? The tragedy of the commons. And they said the tragedy of the commons is that like the common space is not sustainable because somebody is gonna go in and like break it up, and therefore like the common space, it's not gonna work because it's always gonna be divided. And I just thought this was just like the saddest and most like strangely just sad, very indicative of like American perspective, where like the thing that was tragic was the commons in the language. The thing that was tragic wasn't like the individual who invades it and then destroys it. And it's like, no, the commons is fine. That person who comes in there and destroys common space for money or for whatever reason, and just kind of like dismantles the fabric of a society, that person is the problem. But the commons is not. And so yeah, there's a lot of like there's a big linguistic battle that's has to occur, but I think we're more apt and open to engaging in that that conversation now. So yeah, that's Bayanihan. I hope I haven't butchered that word this week. I will feel bad, but if I did, someone tell me and I'll find out and I'll try to make sure I'm better. Like I've taken French for years, my French pronunciation's still off too, so it happens. But if anybody has any more questions, I'm open to answering questions. If not, like this has been a good week. Thanks for joining us late, Fabian. But if you have any questions, I can always go back and explain some more stuff. But yeah, this was our word of the week. And as we bring in more words, there will be more words from more parts of the world. And yeah. So all right, thanks everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And have a good rest of your Sunday. Bye.